And this is a constant journey towards God. A lot of people, unfortunately, never ask the two questions. They never ask themselves, what is the purpose of existence and what happens to me after I die? But whenever they ask these questions, it takes them towards God. The only way you can have the answer to this question, the purpose of existence, what happens to us when we die, is in religion. And all religions answer that question. Science doesn't. So the two ways of existence, one is the spiritual and the other is the material. And for me, if you are on the spiritual road, then you will always be looking for how you can face your God after you die, that you have fulfilled your responsibility as a human being. And our responsibility as a human being is, the more God gives us, the more responsibility we have to lift, to help other human beings.
Well, let's talk about this practical aspect of our lives, helping other human beings and the state of the world, which there are a lot of concerns around the world about where it's moving, many apocalyptic projections. I wonder how you feel about it, and how do you feel about Pakistan's ability to adapt to this shifting landscape?
Well, the world faces two huge challenges. One is climate change, where the material existence, when we only live in this world for material well-being, then the classic example is how we imperil our own existence, is what climate change is. How we have ravaged the earth, and how we have misused the blessings of God. On the other hand, so that is the biggest challenge, I think, for human beings. The second biggest challenge is the plunder of the developing world by the ruling elites of the developing world, where every year huge amounts of money, according to the Factile channel of the Secretary General of the UN, $1.5 trillion move from illegally. There's a trade imbalance anyway. I mean, the money flows through the trade imbalance to the developed world anyway. But the illicit, the illegal, money laundered by the ruling elites, over $1.5 trillion every year moves to the offshore accounts and Western capitals. Now this is going to have severe consequences on food, on hunger, on starvation, on imbalance between the rich and the poor. And so I don't think enough attention is being paid to the second one, because the richer countries benefit from it, because they have this capital inflow, so they don't care. But the poor countries are getting destroyed.
Now, I mentioned Rumi, and he wrote something to the effect that clever people want to change the world, while wise people focus on themselves. And I wonder if the current predicament, including the ones that you talked about, climate change and the plundering of the human societies.
Of the poor countries.
Yeah, if that is in a way a consequence of some clever people trying to make the world a better place.
The plunder is simple. The rich people in the ruling elites, what they do is, when they, as Prime Minister, and me as a Prime Minister, if I want to take money out from Pakistan and my ministers, the only way I can do it is by destroying the institutions that will stop me from doing it. The judiciary, the accountability process, the tax department. So when I destroy the institutions, the country goes down. And this is why countries are poor. But what is happening is the rich countries are now building barriers. They are allowing the capital to come in, but they don't allow the labor to come in. So the only way to stop this people dying of hunger and poverty and this imbalance is for the rich countries to make laws like they have for drug money, like they have for terror financing. They should not allow, for instance, our ex-rulers have living in millions of dollars of properties in London. We can't do anything to get them back because the rich countries, they make it so difficult for let us get the money back. This should change because you want to stop this immigrant problem, poverty in the developing world, then there has to to be a way that if, for instance, we say that, look, this person who was living in Pakistan has these huge properties in London, then unless that person can justify that he got this money legally, the property should be returned to us. That would stop the plunder of the developing world.
We are recording this interview on the eve of your visit to Russia for a highly anticipated meeting between the heads of our countries, whose relationship for a very long time has been conditioned on others. It's been a function of, other processes, regional, global processes. Do you think Russia and Pakistan have reached that point when they can deal with one another as, self-sufficient actors on a bilateral basis rather than, let's say, looking onto others?
Well, let me just go back in history. When the Cold War was, ravaging the whole of the world was divided into blocks. Pakistan moved into the United States. We became part of the bloc in the Cold War with the US. India actually stayed neutral, but it was very close to the Soviets. Now when I look back, I think initially Pakistan needed help because when we became independent, we were impoverished. There were millions of refugees in Pakistan. We needed help. But, beyond 10 years or so, we should have then been non-aligned, independent country, stood on our own feet, not relied on aid. We became part of a bloc because we got foreign aid. When you look back, foreign aid is a curse for a country because you do not fix your own systems, you do not raise your own revenues, you don't increase your exports. You rely on handouts, and it stops a country evolving and developing and becoming self-reliant. So the world being divided into Cold War blocks and Pakistan becoming part of a bloc, when you look back, it stopped us from developing as a country.
Well, you cannot go back, but you can change things moving forward. So you think at this point...
So you learn from history. You learn from your mistakes.
You have to know how to take the knocks. I guess that's your motto in life, right?
You cannot move forward in life until you learn from your mistakes. So now what we want to do is not become part of any bloc. We want to have trading relationships with all countries. We have suffered. India became a hostile country, so the trade between them was minimal. Iran had sanctions, so we couldn't trade on the west side. Afghanistan has 40 years of conflict, so we couldn't go north, and then to Central Asia came into being. And then the whole area standard of living went up. So we want to sort of really, we hope that, sanctions are lifted on Iran so that, we're short of gas here. And, with Iran, it's the cheapest gas we can get. And similarly, we hope that India one day, Indian leadership, I wish they would concentrate on raising people out of poverty in India rather than proving to the world that the Hindus are the most superior race. Their leadership, how can a leadership not worry about having the highest poverty in the world is in the Indian subcontinent? How could they not worry about it rather than trying to prove to the world that the Hindus are superior?
But Prime Minister, on the other hand, many nations go through such period. It could be more or less painful historically, but the spell of nationalism has affected many countries historically. Now, you mentioned that you don't want to play camp politics anymore. You want to be a bridge, and this is a very admirable goal, also a very beautiful metaphor. I think Turkey or even Ukraine framed their foreign policy in such terms a few years back, but they were disappointed. What makes you believe that Pakistan can actually pull it off, being this bridge, let's say in Eurasia, when so many other countries attempted it and failed?
Well, firstly, let me just say one thing. As a student of history, I do not believe that military conflicts solve problems. If you look back, look at the conflict since 9/11. If a third party dispassionately did a proper analysis of so many people killed, what was achieved at the end? What happened in Afghanistan? 20 years of God knows hundreds and thousands of people dying. What was the achievement? So therefore, I'm not a believer in military conflicts. I believe that civilized societies resolve the difference through dialogues. And the countries that rely on military conflict have not studied history properly.
Do you believe, on a personal or let's say on a political level, in some sense of accountability, maybe historical accountability, do you think things will change in the world so that all the great aspirations that you have could be realized without us getting very cynical? Because I hear what you're saying on an emotional level, but I have covered so many wars and I have seen so many people killed absolutely for nothing that I simply don't believe that Western leaders care about things like human lives or even development in the developing countries. I'm sorry for saying that.
It's true. Most leaders, the main concern is to stay in power. So if to stay in power, you know, there's what they call as a good war, they won't mind loss of few human lives.
It's collateral damage. It's not people. It's collateral
exactly.
damage.
I mean, you know, as someone who looks upon the world from a spiritual point of view, I think it is insane to have a conflict with the idea of people dying and thinking that you will get more popular because of that. For instance, take this Ukraine conflict. I mean, for the life of mine, I cannot really believe that there is any chance, there's any possibility of a conflict. Because the consequences, forget about what will happen to the combatants. For the developing world, already the price of oil has gone up because of the prospect of a conflict. Ukraine supplies wheat to the world, and for that matter, Russia. Now imagine what will happen. Already the world is suffering from the after effects of the COVID-19. Imagine if there's a conflict. What will happen to the poor countries? Already the poor countries are suffering. They are already in debt because they had to incur debt because of the consequences of the COVID-19 fallout. So I cannot in my mind understand how can they even have got this close to a conflict? I can't understand this.
Prime Minister, we will try to figure it out after a short break, but let's take a quick pause for the time being. We'll be back in just a few moments. Stay tuned.